She looked at me and said, "You're old, useless, and should get a job if you want respect." My daughter-in-law, Amanda, thought she had the upper hand. Thought I was too weak to fight back. She said it in front of my son like it was nothing. Like all the years I spent raising my children, all the sacrifices I made, didn't mean a thing. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just nodded and walked away. What she didn't know was that I had a plan. By next Monday, I wouldn't just have a job. I'd have everything she thought she owned. I wasn't always like this, quiet, older, and invisible, I suppose. I didn't mind the simple life. I never needed much. When my husband passed away, I had 2 little ones to raise on my own. Greg was just a baby and Lucy was only 5. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep us afloat. I did whatever it took to make sure my kids never felt the weight of our struggles. There were nights I didn't sleep, mornings I barely had the strength to get out of bed. But I never complained. Not once. People often think that sacrifice means giving up something big. But it's not always the big things that matter. It's the quiet things. The time spent running to the store when they needed a new pair of shoes, the extra shift at the diner to put food on the table, the hugs and words of encouragement when life knocked us down. That's how I raised them, with love, with hard work. When Greg got into college, I was determined to help him. I worked extra hours, even took out loans I wasn't sure I could repay, but I did it. He deserved that chance. He was my boy. I also helped him buy his first car. It was an old thing, barely running, but it was enough to get him where he needed to go. I was proud of him. Proud that he had a chance to build his own future. And when my husband's parents grew ill, I didn't hesitate to step in. I took care of them just like they were my own. I never asked for anything in return. It was just what you did. I didn't need a thank you. I didn't need praise. I just believed that love and loyalty were enough. After all these years, I thought that would always be enough. That's how I lived. I gave, I loved, I trusted. It was simple. It worked. Now I live alone in a small house. It's cozy enough. Nothing fancy. I'm not rich, but I have enough. I have my memories, my quiet mornings, and I have my children and grandchildren. I thought at my age that I'd earned peace, that I could trust my family, lean on them when I needed them. But things change. You don't always notice it at first. A missed call here, a visit that doesn't come as often as it used to. I didn't see it at first. I didn't want to. But I knew. I knew Greg was distant and Amanda, his wife, started treating me like I was a burden. First, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe they were just busy. But deep down I could feel it. The distance growing between us. It wasn't the love I'd always known. But I didn't mind it too much. I figured family always comes around. They always do, right? They say love is unconditional. I held on to that. I trusted that love would be enough. Because it always had been before. Greg used to be such a sweet boy. Thoughtful. The kind of son who'd hold my hand crossing the street even when he didn't need to. He used to bring me wildflowers from the schoolyard and write me little notes in crayon. But somewhere along the way that boy grew up and forgot. He met Amanda in college. I remember the first time he brought her home. She was sharp, beautiful, driven. The kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted. I could see that right away. Greg was smitten. And I wanted to be supportive. But from the very beginning, Amanda looked at me like I was in the way. She never said it out loud at first. It was just a look. A tight smile when I offered to help in the kitchen. Sigh when I'd ask a question. I brushed it off. Told myself it was just nerves or stress or maybe I was overthinking it. But over time the looks became words. Little things at first. "Maybe it's time to downsize," she said one day, eyeing my modest house. "This place must be too much for you." Then came the visits. Less frequent, shorter, colder. Greg would say he was busy. Amanda always had some new project at work. Understood. People have lives. families of their own. But when they did visit, Amanda started making me pay rent. Not for staying over, just for visiting. Just a small contribution, she'd say, handing me an envelope to fill. You know, for the utilities. Groceries. You're staying the weekend after all. I didn't argue. I didn't want to cause friction. I just smiled and nodded and tucked the envelope in my purse. Then she started making comments. Subtle at first, then sharper. "You're still healthy," she said one morning, sipping her coffee without looking up. "Maybe it's time you got a job instead of just sitting around." I looked at her, quiet. My heart was thudding in my chest, but my voice stayed soft. "I didn't know love had an invoice," I said. She just rolled her eyes. Greg didn't say a word. That's what hurt the most. Not Amanda's jabs. I could take those. I faced worse in life. But Greg's silence, that cut deep. He used to stand up for me. Used to call every week just to check in. Now when I called him, I got his voicemail more often than his voice. And when I did speak to him, he sounded distracted, like I was interrupting something. I told myself maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he didn't see how Amanda looked at me, how she spoke to me like I was baggage they hadn't figured out how to store away. But deep down I knew. I saw how he followed her lead, how his kindness shrank when she was in the room. He was ambitious now, working hard, climbing ladders. And Amanda was right there beside him, pulling the strings. They started making plans without me. Family dinners I wasn't invited to. Vacations I only heard about after they returned. It was like I had become a shadow in their lives. Present but inconvenient. And still I held my tongue. I kept believing that things would go back to the way they were. That Greg would remember who raised him. That Amanda would soften one day. But I was wrong. They didn't want me around anymore. And the worst part was, they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I didn't go home right away. I drove until the lights of the city turned into long stretches of quiet roads, until the buildings gave way to trees, and the noise inside me grew louder than the world around me. Just before sunrise, I found a small park. I sat down on a worn wooden bench, dragging my old suitcase behind me like some forgotten relic. The cold metal frame of the bench pressed against my back. My purse, the same one I'd carried for years, sat beside me like a companion too tired to comfort me. Around me, the world was starting to wake up. Joggers, a dog barking in the distance, the faint honk of morning traffic. But inside me, nothing moved. I watched the sun peek over the trees. A sunrise I'd have once pointed out to Greg when he was small. "Look, baby, the sky's painting itself just for you." Now I whispered it to no one. After an hour, I finally made my way home. My little apartment was still as I'd left it. Clean, quiet, lonely. Put the kettle on. Out of habit. No appetite. No reason. Just motion. While the water boiled, I walked to my old bookshelf. Opened a drawer. Inside, a small wooden box. I took it to the table and opened the lid. Photographs. Faded, fragile. Greg as a baby. Wrapped in a blue blanket I'd stitched myself. Lucy with a missing tooth, holding up a school project. Then a photo of me and my husband, Robert, taken on our 10th anniversary. He was holding my hand, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. I held that photo for a long time. "I gave them everything," I whispered, voice trembling. "And now I have nothing but my memories." My hand went to my chest, where my locket used to rest. I'd taken it off that night at Greg's house. It was still in my suitcase. I sat there in silence, watching the steam curl from my tea like smoke from something burning. The piano music from my old record player began to drift into the room. Slow, haunting, like the kind that plays at the end of a movie where the heroine loses everything. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just let the ache bloom in my chest. Let it stretch and settle like it had been waiting for this moment. When the tears finally came, they were quiet. Heavy. One by one, like drops from a leaking roof you've learned to ignore until the whole ceiling caves in. I curled up on the couch, blanket pulled to my chin, and stared at the wall until it blurred. I thought about calling Lucy again, but my hand wouldn't reach for the phone. I couldn't bear to hear the ring, the voicemail, the reminder that even my daughter had grown distant. I thought about the time I stayed up for 3 nights straight when Greg had the flu in 3rd grade. About how I sold my jewelry to help pay for his college tuition. About the couch he and Amanda sat on when they told me I was no longer welcome. My stomach turned. "This can't be how it ends," I muttered to the empty room. "This can't be the final chapter." But what would I do? I was 70 years old. No job. No close family. Just my name and my memories. Still, something strange began to flicker inside me. Not anger, not yet. But something close to it. The kind of silence that didn't beg for pity. The kind that sharpened. Sat up. Looked around the apartment. Really looked. Then I stood and walked to the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't defeated. Not yet. She looked tired, yes. But there was steel under the sorrow. And that night, in the quiet of my little home, I decided. If they thought I was useless, invisible, they had no idea what I was still capable of. 3 days passed. 3 long days of silence, of sitting with my memories, of boiling the same kettle without ever drinking the tea. Then on the 4th morning I reached into my address book, the paper one with names written in fading ink, and found the name I hadn't spoken in years. Thomas Claiborne. Tom had been my Robert's best friend since childhood. He was the best man at our wedding, the godfather to our children, and once, the man who handed Robert a chance that changed our lives forever. Robert never cared for business. He was a mechanic, a dreamer. But Tom believed in him. Brought him into a logistics firm back in the 80s. Handed him a stake when the company was still just trucks and promises. After Robert died, I never paid it any mind. I didn't need the money, and I never asked questions. But that morning something whispered, "Call him." So I did. His voice hadn't changed. Still warm, still gruff around the edges. When I told him what had happened, the dinner, the eviction, the words Amanda threw at me like knives, he went silent, and then he said, "Come over. Now." His home was just outside the city, a brick house wrapped in ivy and memories. He met me at the door like no time had passed, pulled me into a hug that felt like the first safe thing in days. We sat in his study, surrounded by old ledgers, framed awards, and photos of men shaking hands in suits I never cared to understand. "I don't know what to do, Tom," I told him. "They made me feel like I was a burden. Like I don't matter anymore." He stared at me long and hard. Then, with the calmness of someone who'd been waiting for this day, he said, "Martha, you still own half of my old logistics firm. Remember? Your husband's share." My heart skipped and blinked. That was still active. He nodded. "We never sold your shares. I bought the other half from the original partners years ago. But Robert's, your portion remained untouched. I figured you'd come to me when you needed it. Well, looks like it's time." I sat back in the leather chair. The weight of his words pressing into me like gravity had shifted. Then he smiled, slowly, almost mischievously. "Did you know Amanda works there now?" Froze. "She what?" "Yeah. Marketing director. She's smart, I'll give her that. But she has no idea you've been sitting on the majority vote this whole time." My fingers gripped the armrests. "You don't need a job, Martha," Tom said, leaning forward. "You own one." That night I didn't sleep. I pulled out old files, tax records, anything with Robert's name on it. And there it was, buried under years of dust and grief, proof that my name was still on the papers. Tom wasn't just being kind. He was right. For 40 years, I had quietly held power I never claimed. And now it had a purpose. We spent the next few days meeting lawyers, updating documentation, shifting titles. I sat in boardrooms with men who called me ma'am, until they saw the documents and changed it to Madam Chair. And with Tom's remaining shares officially transferred, I became the majority stakeholder of the very company Amanda worked for. The first time I stepped into that office, no one recognized me. Not the receptionist, not the interns, not even Amanda when she brushed past me, clutching her phone and barking orders like a queen. But I stood there, in heels I hadn't worn in years, in a suit that felt like armor, and I smiled. Because they didn't know. Not yet. But very soon. Amanda would find out exactly who she had told to get a job. And this time, I wouldn't be the one leaving the room in tears. Monday morning came with its usual rush. Heels on tile, coffee in hand, phones glued to ears. Amanda swept through the glass doors of the company like she owned the building. In her mind, she practically did. She didn't notice me. I stood quietly in the conference room, watching her reflection in the polished glass as she laughed with another executive. "Big day today," she said, tossing her hair. "New owners touring the place. Let's all pretend we like our jobs." They all laughed. A few minutes later, an email was sent. Mandatory staff meeting. 9 a.m. Main conference hall. Amanda adjusted her blazer, powdered her nose, and took her usual seat at the head of the table. One by one the employees filed in. Whispers started. I entered last. And when I did, the air changed. Few people straightened. Some stood. Amanda furrowed her brow, confused. Then her eyes locked on mine. Confusion turned to disbelief. Smiled. Not cruelly, not smugly. Just calmly. I took the seat at the head of the table. "Good morning," I said, placing my leather folder on the polished wood. "I'll be observing for the next few weeks. I want to understand how my employees operate." You could hear a pin drop. Amanda's face drained of color. "Employees?" she whispered. I looked directly at her. "Yes, employees." I didn't explain more. I didn't need to. I let the silence do what Amanda's voice never could. Command respect. That week, I didn't make any grand announcements. I simply watched. I reviewed performance reports, sat in on meetings, walked the floors during breaks. And what I saw confirmed what Tom had told me. Amanda wasn't a leader. She was a climber. Loud, flashy, full of buzzwords and empty praise. But her team was burned out, confused and scared of her. Her department had the highest turnover rate in the company. Morale was low. And yet, she blamed everyone but herself. I didn't fire her. No, that would be too easy. I demoted her. Quietly. Professionally. The official reason. Ineffective management and failure to meet leadership metrics. She lost her private office, her parking space, her title. And when she walked in that Monday and saw someone else's nameplate on her door, she stormed straight to Greg. I don't know what was said, but I do know what happened next. My phone rang. Answered. Calm, cool. "Mom," he started. "Hello, Greg," I said. There was a pause. I could hear the stress in his voice. She's upset. She thinks you're punishing her. That this is personal." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "She told me to get a job." I did. "And now she works for me." He didn't respond. Hung up. I wasn't cruel. I didn't spread gossip or gloat. I simply let the system Amanda worshipped deliver the consequences. Over time, people in the company began to come alive again. The fear left the room when she entered. New leadership took root where ego had once grown. And Amanda, she adjusted. She learned to listen, to lower her voice, to ask instead of demand. Whether that was out of humility or fear, I never asked. I didn't do it to ruin her. I did it to remind myself, and perhaps her, what real power looks like. It's not loud. It's not cruel. It doesn't shout across dinner tables or throw out mothers like garbage. Real power is patient. It waits like a seed buried deep, until one day it blooms, quietly, unmistakably, and on its own terms. Some people chase power to hold it. Others chase it just to prove they could. Me. I never chased it at all. I just picked up what they dropped when they decided I no longer mattered. The company sent me a statement at the end of each month. Tidy profit shares, dividends, little reminders that I held the keys now. But I never kept a cent. Not for myself. I set up a quiet fund. No big speeches, no grand announcements. Just a simple mission to help women like I used to be. Women who were told they were too old, too poor, too tired. Single mothers going back to school. Grandmothers raising their grandchildren. Widows starting over with nothing but faith. That money went into second chances. Into books, childcare, transportation, tuition. I'd see their letters sometimes. Handwritten. Grateful. Hopeful. You changed my life. I didn't think I could do this. Thank you. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because it was never about recognition. It was about dignity. The same dignity Amanda tried to rip from me at a dinner table. The same dignity Greg traded for convenience. The same dignity I refused to lose, even when they made me carry my suitcase out of the house I helped build. So now, every month, while Amanda clocks in and answers to someone she once dismissed, a woman she's never met opens a textbook. A mother kisses her child goodbye before heading to class. A grandmother doesn't have to choose between groceries and tuition. All because someone like me remembered who she was. Not a burden. Not a leftover. Not a ghost in her own family. But a builder. A survivor. A woman who carried generations forward. And finally stood tall for herself. I don't need more. I just wanted to remind them who I am. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the sharpest truths. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to slam doors or raise my fists. I just stood. And standing was enough. Would you have forgiven someone who humiliated you like that? Or would you rise like I did? You don't have to be young or rich to take your power back. You just have to remember who you are. And never let anyone make you forget. Comment, justice served. If you believe I did the right thing. And if you want more stories that prove karma doesn't miss, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and letting them watch.